This is not a one-way.
This is one way?
No, it's not.
No.
I'm saying you're on the left-hand side. But
Oh, this is a one-way.
now we're passing Whitaker Hospital, which is where I was born. I spent a few days there as a kid. This was full of businesses and restaurants. This was actually a thriving community. The Moton Center there was a theater, was actually a movie theater. So you had the Moton and the Dixie, and you also had the Jefferson, which was on 25th Street and Jefferson Avenue. My first neighborhood was a good one because we lived right next door to a candy store. And in those days, a nickel would buy a bag full. Those days, too, there was a store next to the church, so you could go and buy a little thing called a bean shooter. And so we still, unfortunately, there's a janitor there that I need to apologize to. I'm McKinley Price, and this is my Newport News. Good morning, sir.
Hey.
How are you?
Oh, Lord, got him in hand. See that?
How's it going, man?
All right.
Good.
Nobody recognize you being in here, man. Can't beat that.
Good seeing you. Good seeing you.
All right.
All right. I'm McKinley Price, born in Newport News, lived here in the southeast part of the city most of my life. Been back since 1977 and happy that I was born in Newport News and lived here. I was born in 26th Street, 700 block, and we lived there until I was about 5 years of age. My house was about 2 doors down from the corner, so it would be right in here, 710 26th Street, on a one-way street is my first house. My mother and father and my brother and I lived downstairs, and my grandmother actually lived upstairs. I am blessed with the longevity of my mother. She'll be 99 next month. And this Madison Avenue was actually, that and 26th Street was my playground. It was where I would ride my bike. Of course, I only lived here till I was about 5 years of age, so I didn't stray too far from this area. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional tennis player. I wanted to be Arthur Ashe. But then at the age of 8, I was very sick. So I had exploratory surgery at Whitaker Hospital. Going back through some documents, I found a hospital bill, $258, 1 week in the hospital, anesthesia, $5. It was unbelievable. But what was interesting about that is the person that did the surgery was now my father-in-law. C. Waldo Scott. We had a brother and a sister to marry brother and sister. So if you had a sister and I had a sister, I married your sister, you married my sister. So the cousins were double first cousins. So the family was very, very close. I had a brother that was 7 years older than I am, who's since passed. And I have a sister who's 10 years younger than I am. So the funny thing about that is when my mother delivered my sister, my brother drove us to the hospital to have my sister. That's how widespread we were. Up until I was 5, there wasn't much of a world other than family. It was just living in that one block because I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. But when we moved, we still had connections there. So I would take my bicycle and ride back to the boys club on Hampton Avenue. I also delivered papers. So there was a Journal and Guide, which was a weekly paper. So on Thursdays, I would deliver the papers and come back Saturday in the neighborhood to collect. So that's probably why I have a fear of dogs, because in those days, too, there was no leash law. So the dogs were all over the place. So you had to fight your way in sometimes to some neighborhoods or be able to run pretty fast. We moved when I was about 5 to Marshall Avenue and 31st Street on the corner. Anshaw Barnes lived there. Mr. Bolding, the choir director, lived around the block.
So all of your teachers and policemen and everybody lived in the neighborhood in those days. And this is where I moved 31st and Marshall Avenue when I was 5 years old, and stayed here the majority of my life. So it was really good neighborhood, close to Huntington, close to ball fields. It was a great move because it was a brand new house. The thing I was gonna miss was my grandmother and her cooking.
My school history is pretty interesting because I started out at John Marshall, the old John Marshall, which is since gone. And then when we moved, I went to Thomas Jefferson. So I went to Thomas Jefferson to 1st to 3rd grade, graduated, and then came back because it expanded to the 5th grade. After that, I went 6th grade to Booker T. Washington and 7th grade to Walter Reed, which is now the Downing Gross building. From there, went to high school because high school, we didn't have middle school. High school was 8th through 12th grade, which was Huntington High School.
It was a wonderful experience to be at Huntington. Huntington, we had about 2,300 students in this building at that time, and we had very, very strict rules. You could be sent home for having your shirt tail out. And the motto was Huntington High School students always act like ladies and gentlemen. And it was preached and lived daily. Wonderful experience. Great education. Of course, during the days of segregation, we had a lot of teachers who had higher degrees because they couldn't get jobs anywhere else. So I had teachers with masters and PhDs even in high school.
Well, high school, I was fast because you either fought well or you ran fast. I did a little of both, but I played tennis. I became a pretty good tennis player. Actually, that's how I went to college, on a tennis scholarship.
But this is the rec, Dory Miller Recreation Center, where I spent a lot of time too, because the parking lot here is actually where the tennis courts were. So we would play, we had 2 courts here and 2 courts over across from the hospital. So we would have tennis matches that would start about 2 in the afternoon and go to 8 at night because we had lights as well. Ironic here, we have C. Waldo Scott Center, which again is named after my father-in-law. This is an actual duplication of the Dory Miller. So they actually had a recreation center for blacks and an identical recreation center for whites. Each had their own swimming pool. We also had, in the earlier days, tennis courts over here as well, until Huntington expanded, took all of that down.
Segregation was alive and well as I was raised. And you didn't really think about it in the day-to-day. It was just accepted behavior. Going to segregated schools, going to certain movies. If you went to a integrated movie, you were relegated to stay upstairs. Those things had an impactful part on my life. The assassination of Martin Luther King. I was in a sophomore at Hampton University at the time. We actually did a silent march down through the city of Hampton and back on campus. Just seeing that change in the country. I actually taught for 6 months in Newport News, and it was the first year of integration. And I was the only male teacher in this small school. And to see how kids would come into the classroom and segregate themselves by race, and as the year progressed, to see the interaction start to change and touching hair and looking at different textures, and that was pretty impactful to see.
Yeah, this is what was Booker T. Washington. Right here on the corner, this was a baseball field. So this is where I played Little League Baseball. The Pirates could not wait to get out of school to play.
Koufax reaches back for one final burst of energy, and Allison fans.
In those days too, the World Series was during the day. So I lost more radios, running the little wire up to your hand, putting the earpiece in your hand. It was tough knowing that the World Series was going on and you were missing it. All these schools we walked to. So, and you got a book bag full of books. And like I said, I was a little kid, man.
My father was born in Littleton, North Carolina, and it was just a haven for us as kids. He had a 66-acre farm, so probably the day after school ended, we were headed to North Carolina for the summer. But I just enjoyed following my grandfather around. I just worshiped this guy. I mean, he did everything, you know, milking the cows. We'd go feed the hogs. It had a garden. Everything was fresh food. Those memories, I think, some of the best that I can remember as a kid, just being raised on that farm. I didn't find out about how far back my family went until probably in high school. You know, my great-great-grandfather was the founder of the first form of religion in Newport News, First Church of Newport News. That's why it's called First Church of Newport News and then parenthesis Baptist. Reverend Thomas Poole, who founded several churches from Surrey, Virginia. That's my mother's great-grandfather. In reading the history, I said, wow, that's fantastic to be able to know that your roots go back to the beginning of the city. The original church was where the railroad tracks were. It was a wooden edifice, and when the railroad expanded, they moved that church to 23rd and Jefferson Avenue.
It had a tremendous steeple. It was one of the first things you could see when you came across the James River Bridge. You could see the steeple of 23rd Street Church, Jefferson Avenue. It's a tremendous building.
When you go to church and you belong to a church where your relatives have helped found, and where my father was a deacon, when we moved to the new church on Wickham Avenue, to see my father just literally brick by brick go over the drawings and help build that church, there was a great pride still there.
Right here is first is the church, St. Augustine's Church. My wife and I actually different faiths. She's Episcopal and I'm Baptist, so we have what we call a mixed marriage religiously. We actually had both ministers in our wedding, which was really cool. And the wedding was actually in my wife's family's backyard, which was a real nice event. But I learned one thing. When the sun hits black patent leather shoes in an August wedding, it'll really set your feet on fire. 25th Street you had Woodage drugstore, you had hot dog shop, you had the cleaners, you had a jewelry store, you had a bank, you had physicians' offices, dentist's office, ophthalmologist. Of course, you had here the barbershop. This is where I first started getting my hair cut at Esquire Barbershop. My father got his hair cut there. My son's first haircut was here as well. And we still come here to get our hair cut.
I'm 79 years old, and I don't know, Lord keep me here for summer. There ain't nothing I did.
So when Daddy would bring me here to get my hair cut, you know, I used to always, as I started growing, because in those days they did the razor around the ear, so you knew you were growing up when you first got your razor. So I got my
man,
first.
you can get it before you was about 10 or 12.
Right,
You got
right.
that. You done crossed
You on your way.
line
Right.
there, didn't
That's
you?
right. That was a
Yes,
milestone.
sir. Yes, sir.
No question.
Sure was, man.
I used to ride my bike from when we moved to Marshall Avenue up to Mount Chess and leave it there and then walk here to get my hair cut. Yeah, absolutely. You were the first one to cut my son's hair too. Good thing about the good old days, man.
It
I really
is.
appreciate
It
what
is.
you've
I
done,
want you
because
to
this
know.
has been a cornerstone of the Southeast, man.
Yeah.
Glad to see
I
it.
hope, and I hope it'll continue to be.
You got a room full, so it looks like you do.
Hello, Newport News.
I never really had the concept of, you know, that drive that people have that want to be mayor.
I want to thank your mayor, McKinley Price, who served this nation bravely in the U.S. Army.
Actually, when the former mayor, Mayor Frank, was retiring, I was on the committee to help locate a mayor. I'm not a great orator. I have no desire to be, you know, famous and public. So what occurred for me to become mayor was that people had to convince me that this was the time and the place to do this. And especially my wife, because she was pretty much anti-politics at the time. She already had a brother that was in politics, and he was never home. She thought one politician in the family was enough. And she was my out. I said, you convince my wife, I'll run. Knowing that there was no way that was gonna happen. But one day she came to me and she said, you know, you need to do this. It's just been too many people have come to me and said, you need to do this. Now is the time. I, McKinley Leonard Price,
Do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear. So I did.
So help me God.
So help me God. So now she has 3 politicians in the family because my daughter's now in the House of Delegates. I think if adult McKinley could talk to child McKinley, it probably would have been to study harder. But I had a life that I loved because my father believed in doing everything, all sports, not only, the books, but to enjoy life as well. Once I got a concept in school, I wasn't worried about the grade. So, I just wanted the concept, and I had a good time in school and college. So probably would have said, yeah, hit the books a little bit more. Wow. If I could change one thing in this city, it probably would be the attitude. Attitude is something that each of us has that we can control. And it's very important how you start the day, how you interact with people, how you discuss a topic. Because we are so diverse in our thinking and the way we were brought up that we don't take the time to put ourselves in other people's places. We don't take the time to have dialogue that is beneficial. If we could change people's attitudes, I think we could do some tremendous things.
And this here is the edge of Brooks Crossings, which is right in here where the shipyard is going to build their 100,000 square foot building, which is going to be tremendous addition to the neighborhood. Yeah. This used to be a Sears Roebuck. Yep. But that was nothing but shopping down here. Nachman's, Floor Shine Shoes. This was all before the malls, the days of the malls.
My dreams for the future of Newport News would be that we continue to grow. Geographically, we're in the center of the East Coast. We have the resources, we have the water, we have the economic potential with the shipyard and other major industries here, that this could actually be a place where people really want to come to, raise a family, live, learn, prosper. And I think that's going to be the future of Newport News. Yeah, I think if I was fortunate enough to leave a message for any future mayor, would be to treat people with respect, not judge people, and know that people want to help. We get so wrapped up in our day-to-day and our goal settings that we don't listen to all levels of people. And if you have the opportunity to sit and listen, you'll see that people have their best interests at heart for the city and for the growth of it. If we would just listen, I think that we would be able to see some amazing things that people have, and that we could take what we hear and take those ideas, and you then have the power as mayor to be able to formulate policy that will continue to help the city. But you gotta listen. Well, I think any kid that looks at my life would see that I'm an icon for average. Average kid in school. Well, maybe above average in math and science. A slow reader. A person brought up in a segregated housing, segregated schools, and would be able to see that if he can do these things from where he was born, under the circumstances he was raised, that I've got a shot too. And I hope every kid understands that if you have a desire to do something, to keep that dream, to fight for it, and to continue to study and do it. I mean, I am just an example of possibilities. If I can make it in those times, become mayor of a city, any kid, if they have the potential and the desire, can have a successful life in this city.
For more information about the history and the people of Newport News, come to any Newport News Public Library. Special thanks to the Virginiana Room inside the Main Street Library and the Newsom House Museum and Cultural Center for their assistance with this production.